And we know that, well, according to ancient Jewish tradition, the time of Passover is also sanctified by special readings, not only from the Torah, but also from the Tanakh. And there's a special additional reading for Passover from the Song of Songs, or Shir HaShirim in Hebrew. And I actually want to read from the 2nd chapter, starting at the 10th verse of this wonderful book. My beloved began to speak to me, "Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth her green figs, and the vines with the tender grape give a good smell. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away." This is the good news, the good news. Behold, the winter is already past. The rain is over and gone. In our context, behold, the winter is past, the frosts are over and gone. The bitter frosts that were gripping our land for an unprecedentedly long time. So for Ukrainians, and especially for Kyivans, this is amazing good news. The time of the frosts has ended. The time of freezing out residential buildings has ended. Such a difficult time has ended, in which many simply could not survive in Kyiv because their homes were deprived of heat, electricity, in some cases even cold water. This hard, especially difficult time has ended. Kyiv has stood firm despite our internal troubles. Ukraine has stood firm despite much that we would like to change in our country. It stood firm and unwavering in a most difficult and challenging battle, not only with a truly terrible and relentless aggressor, but also with the weather and its absolutely unprecedented fluctuations, such as these unpredictable changes. And so, as we read now, in these days leading up to Passover, these wonderful lines. You know, honestly, I get this strong feeling that it is the Lord speaking to us, to me personally, to each of us, to every one of those who is ready to hear His voice. He wants a spiritual blossoming to begin within us. He wants us, having survived these hardest months, to truly take heart, so that we always remember deep in our hearts that we are beloved, we are God's beloved. That we rise up and begin a new stage of the Exodus. We have plenty to leave behind, friends. We absolutely do. You know, the courageous people of Ukraine has endured so much over nearly 10 years of war and more than 2 years of full-scale terrible war. But these years, unfortunately, have really taken quite a toll on many of us, honestly, and not always in such a favorable way. Some people have PTSD, while others experience disappointment. Some have persistent fears, and others live in a state of anxiety. Some individuals carry bitterness and disappointment, not just in politicians, not just in forecasts, not just in circumstances, but some even feel disappointment in God. These feelings can be difficult to talk about, and they can be a source of inner conflict. You know, It seems to many people that God is either not especially loving or He is not truly almighty. Either not so loving or not almighty. How did He allow all this? How could He allow it? How could God allow it? Then why does He endure it for so long? Why does He delay in saving Ukraine? Why does He tolerate this war for so long? Why does He tolerate the death of people for so long? And often they are completely innocent. How can this be? But, sometimes it seems that people have such a sincere, such a tragic lack of understanding. And they want to find someone responsible for everything that's happening. I want to say that something similar happened in Egypt as well. Can you imagine, friends? Israel, which was invited by the Pharaoh to Egypt, was specifically allocated a special and distinct area of land. Israel, which was under the special and direct patronage and protection of the almighty Vice Pharaoh of Egypt, Joseph. Israel, which enjoyed privileges. And, in general, it actually appeared to behave pretty much normally, honestly. Gradually, it degraded and found itself in defeat. And not just in defeat, but in a long and difficult state of slavery, where they were forced to live and work under the harsh control of Pharaoh and the Egyptian rulers, who held all the power and made life extremely hard for them every single day, under the priests and so on. People were simply shocked. The Jews, how could the God of Israel allow this? Why? Why was this happening? Why could this even continue? And so can you imagine such a thing? Pharaoh. Another Pharaoh, as if the oppression and humiliation of the Jewish people weren't enough, he gives the order to kill male infants. Well, this is just some kind of madness, simply genocidal, if one can put it that way. The first attempt at a Holocaust, it was not, thank God, successful, but the situation was very difficult, critical. Rescued as a baby, Moshe, also known as Moses, was adopted by the queen, the daughter of Pharaoh, and was brought up for 40 years in the grand royal palace as a royal son. Well, or at least a grandson. At some point he wakes up. Can you believe it? 40 years, yes, 40 years have passed. For all that time he was asleep, unaware of everything. Then after those 40 years he finally wakes up and decides, I must find out what is happening to my people. At 40, a Jewish self-consciousness awakened in him. Listen, not at 7, not at 8, not at 10, not at 16, not at 20, and not even at 30. A person who is 40 years old, Prince, I think many have seen the movie The Prince of Egypt. Suddenly, he comes to the realization that he is actually Jewish, and this discovery feels urgent and important to him. He immediately feels a strong need to find out as soon as possible how his Jewish brothers live. You know what happened next with this attempt to stand in solidarity with his people. And the oppression that had lasted for all those 40 years intensified even more after Moses fled. Decades pass. The next generation, essentially, the old one is gone, a new one. And the life of the Jews gets worse and worse and worse. And finally, they reached such a limit when it was impossible to endure. You know, many Jews, when the Nazis began to deprive them of certain rights, then additional rights, then these and those, and when they were driven into the ghetto, it would seem, well, this can no longer be endured, but they endured. Something similar was happening to the Jews in Egypt. They endured, holding on until almost the very end. And only then did they finally begin to sob and weep, just like the Jews in Persia when Haman's decree was issued. Crying out to God in anguish, they pleaded, "How could you let this happen? How could this possibly be? Oh God, how many years we've been suffering. And it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse." You know, that's how many of us feel, many of us in Ukraine. How? Why is this happening? Why? Where is God? When will this all end? We're the good ones. An evil force is against us, and so on and so forth. And indeed, an evil force is against us, just like against Israel in Egypt. But it turns out God was waiting for His people to offer a real, living, massive, and truly united prayer to Him, one that comes from the heart and is shared together as one. And only when Moses turned 80 years old, imagine just during the life of Moses, this oppression continued and intensified for 80 years. I don't mean to say that in Ukraine it's all sunshine and roses. Of course, a terrible war, terrible casualties, terrible abuse from our so-called brotherly neighbor. But listen, 80 years, that's only during the life of Moses. And it started before him, long before him. And it was precisely this long suffering of the people, in a bad sense, that actually kept God from really intervening or stepping in to help. When the outcry, the shout, the prayer, and the weeping to God began, God revealed the miraculous burning bush to Moses. I think, regardless of how you look at it, you know, honestly, we really do lack large-scale united prayers to God are being offered in Ukraine. Oh, we lack them. Someone might object, oh, come on, so many people are praying. But has anyone counted how many? Has anyone actually checked for real? Because there's a mass of people in Ukraine, those who are nominally considered Christians, but for the most part they identify as Orthodox. First of all, a mass, the majority of them, if they ever set foot in a church, it was usually just once a year. And by the way, specifically on Easter. And I don't want to specifically single out the Orthodox from everyone else. It's just that Ukraine is considered an Orthodox country. Friends, the Lord wants, He expects us to hear. The winter has already passed. The rain is over. A bitter cold rain falls with bitter icy frosts. We need to open up to God's fire, which will melt the remaining ice in our souls. We need to open up to God's fire, which will burn away the trash that has accumulated in our souls. We need to open up to God's fire, which would burn down all the walls dividing people in Ukraine and help us unite in this fire and make our prayers truly fiery and heartfelt, ascending up to the throne of mercy. Something similar began to happen in Israel. Something similar began to happen, and that's why the shepherd who carefully looked after the flocks of sheep and goats in Midian, for a pagan priest, he turned into a great prophet. Listen, 80 years, can you believe it? That is such a long time, 80 whole years. We don't see a single encounter with God. 80 years, 80 long years, not even the slightest prophetic manifestation at all. And this elder, this old shepherd, who spent 40 of his last years in total and complete separation from his homeland and from his Jewish people, just think about it, surrounded by pagans, the son-in-law of a pagan priest. Imagine the isolation, the distance from everything familiar, the challenge of holding on to his identity in such a foreign place. And so when it would seem life is at its end, he reaches, it is written, to the end of his desert. That is exactly what the original says. When he reached the end of the desert. And where was the end of this desert? At Mount Horeb. That very Sinai, where he was destined to become a bridge between the great God and his people. Only then was the burning bush revealed to him, which burned and was not consumed. How important it is for Ukraine, especially now, that believers are able to hear these words, beloved. Hearing this can bring comfort and hope, reminding people of their worth and the love that surrounds them, even in difficult times. Arise, my beloved ones. You are beautiful, shining with grace and filled with light. Come out, step forward, and rise up together. Unite your hearts and spirits in this Paschal, holy explosion, a celebration of hope, renewal, and joy. Let us join as one, embracing this sacred moment of resurrection and new beginnings. Enough of simply putting up with the way things are going just as they are. Well, it goes on. What can we do? Well, almost nothing depends on us. No, we are called to receive this amazing power of God that He gives to everyone who responds. In response to His call, he slowly rises up, then comes out from where he was, stands up tall and comes out once more. And finally, with determination, tears through this veil of habitual inertia, eventually stops thinking that our somewhat semi-Egyptian existence is in fact the only such mode that can define our life. No, there is another life. There is another time, there is another level of relationship with God. And if we take upon ourselves the responsibility of the Paschal Exodus, then the Paschal authority and Paschal power will begin to unfold within us in such a fire that it is even hard for us to imagine now. I say this, I address this, of course, to myself as well, or to myself first and foremost. But I have a real Paschal, spring-like anticipation that the Lord has indeed been waiting long enough. The Lord is ready to raise up new prophets, new anointed ones, courageous, daring individuals, those who risk everything for Him and His people, who until now, perhaps, have rather slowly dragged out such an ordinary, non-existent existence. It really doesn't matter, because God showed us in the history of the Passover that it is not age alone that determines victory, nor do the circumstances of a previous life determine victory. It is not the mistakes that we have made in the past that determine victory, but rather the readiness and willingness to go all the way to the end of your desert, where you can encounter the burning bush of God's glory and God's holy presence. Neither Moses, without the deep feeling of despair and the desperate, heartfelt cry to God of practically all of Israel, nor Israel without the fact that this man, who was actually 80 years old, indeed met this with his Israeli God and placed his trust and his heart fully in him. Neither one without the others, nor the others without this, could have brought about the great Passover. We need those individual anointed ones of God who perhaps never even felt like such, but common prayer, common holy indignation, the common cry of God's children, the readiness to unite in prayer of various communities of God, denominations, and so on. There are serious differences between the spiritual situation here now, this Passover, this Pesach, and there in Midian and in Egypt with Israel, with the people of Israel before that first Passover. Back then there was one leader of Israel, Aaron, his brother. He was like a translator, a turgman, and a co-prophet. But fundamentally, in essence, the leader was Moses alone. Now, in this moment, we find that we no longer need to search for one great leader, because we already have one truly great leader among us. The one for whom Moses became a prototype. We have this leader, we have the Messiah. We don't need a second Messiah. This cannot be and should not be, and it is meaningless. Our Messiah, who has already come and who has accomplished the great redemption of all Israel and through Israel of all humanity. Our Messiah, who is now seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven, continually interceding for us. Our Messiah, who graciously sent the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, upon his people, upon all of his devoted disciples. He acts and is always ready to act every single day, but he needs a response from below, from us, his followers. He waits patiently for us to answer his call, to respond with faith and obedience, so that his work can be fulfilled in our lives. And he wants to unite many Moseses, individuals who are ready and willing to step up and lead the people at their own unique level, each prepared to guide and support that specific part of the people that the chief Messiah, Yeshua, has personally entrusted to them. He desires to bring them together, to unite them with a shared purpose, a common vision, and a sense of unity and collaboration, so that they may work together as one, moving forward in harmony and strength. Prayer explosion in Ukraine. Almighty, your mercy is great. You do not want the Ukrainian people to suffer, to endure pain and hardship, to suffer from this vile and terrible war. You do not want innocent people to die every single day. You do not want the destruction, the devastation to continue, to go on without end, of cities, towns, and villages, as well as critical infrastructure, for residential buildings and homes to be bombed, for even passenger trains and cargo trains to be hit and destroyed, just as the Russians have been doing lately. You want to liberate Ukraine, to free its people and restore peace. You also want to liberate Russia from this tyranny. God, Bless everyone in Russia who holds the truth dear, who truly values honesty and integrity above all else. Bless everyone in Russia who longs for freedom, who dreams of living in a country where liberty and justice are genuinely respected. Bless everyone in Russia who at their own level prays and acts, no matter how small their actions may seem, so that this tyranny finally collapses, so that these terrible wars of conquest and aggression may cease, so that internal Russian terror is stopped, so that this deep and persistent longing for a new Stalin, which has gripped and taken hold of some Russians, is finally and completely crushed, and so that people everywhere may truly repent for what has happened. Bless, 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 bless. May there be peace, may there be understanding, and may there be healing for all. But first of all, I want us all to be able to cry out to you for a breakthrough in Ukraine. God, we need various Moseses, and we also need various Aarons. We need those people who, each and every one of them, play their own important part in this journey. In their place, at their level, will accept your call and desire to be filled with this fire. No matter how scorching it may seem, because this fire, when we open up to it, it does not consume those who have opened up. On the contrary, it lifts them up, it refines them, it performs the miracle of the resurrection of faith, compassion, love, and holy Passover joy, without which a breakthrough in Ukraine is impossible. God, spread your holy and consuming fire. Let this powerful spiritual blaze fill and ignite all communities, every single church, and all congregations everywhere. Let the body of the Messiah rise up in your fire, empowered and transformed, and accomplish your great Passover exodus, fulfilling your divine purpose. As you command your people. Bishem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.